Thanks for listening to FPRN. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like to start your own show with FPRN, advertise with us, or donate to the network or to your favorite shows, check out our website at www.fprnradio.com.
Cursed to see the murder, freedom with no signs of remorse. Are we cursed to see the murder, freedom with no signs of remorse? All
right, thanks for joining us live on the Big Plantation on another Sunday edition, brought to you by FPRNradio.com. All right, so I want to move right into the guest segment of our show. We have, and I'm really excited to have on, Dane Wigington, the producer of both documentaries, What in the World Are They Spraying and Why in the World Are They Spraying? And also he runs geoengineeringwatch.org, which is updated pretty regularly with a lot of information on the topic of geoengineering. Dane, happy to have you with us. How's it going?
Good to be here, guys. I got to give credit that the two movies mentioned were definitely Michael Murphy's films. I want to give credit to him for those. I was interviewed with that and helped him behind the scenes, but those were definitely his films.
Gotcha. Thanks for that clarification. So I guess to get started, thanks to those documentaries, the conversation around this whole topic has really expanded, and it's something that I think a lot of people don't understand a lot of the science behind, and now that the conversation has expanded, there's a lot more, I would say, scrutiny or eyes on the topic. So just as kind of like a base, what is your case for geoengineering in general, and how do we pinpoint it?
Again, yeah, there's definitely confusion on the issue, but only because that's mainstream media's goal, is to create that confusion. And mainstream media almost never mentions the terms that would lead people to science and not fringe. So you hear the term chemtrails mentioned a lot by mainstream media, but you don't hear the term climate engineering or geoengineering, other than the science publications that mention geoengineering as only a proposal, not as existing deployed programs. But geoengineering, for those that don't fully understand it, it involves a number of different scenarios. But in this case, what we're speaking about is climate engineering, and that climate engineering involves a number of applications. Manipulation of your jet stream with ionosphere heaters like HARP. Many have heard of HARP. And there's a multitude of these facilities that can heat the ionosphere and stir the jet stream, and aerosol disbursement, which is stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. That's the jets we see spraying like all the time in the skies above us. So there's a number of aspects of atmospheric geoengineering, but those are two of the primary ones.
Yeah, and I've definitely tried to step away from using the term chemtrail as being in contact with my friend Julio. Has made a documentary, and basically that's just a word that is put out, like you said, to make it into the realm of fringe and ignoring the science, so then you could just say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, and use all these other hollow terms to dismiss it. So you had said that what we're seeing is actually stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. What exactly does that entail, and what... Because I know that there's some patents and things like that out there that actually describe this, where we can actually look at and point to and say, look, it is on the books, it is a matter of record. If you could shed some more light on that to kind of help people understand.
It absolutely is. Anybody who truly objectively investigates this issue, you can't not conclude it's going on. I mean, it's right in front of our face. Another couple acronyms: SRM, solar radiation management; SAG, stratospheric aerosol injection. But the primary stated goal on many of the geoengineering patents is to alter the amount of direct thermal energy penetrating the atmosphere by the sun, to adjust the planet's energy balance, if you will, by deflecting some of the incoming radiation. So this involves, again, basically covering the planet with a layer of reflected aerosols. And right now we have global dimming, another science term many are not familiar with. We have 22 to 25% of the sun's direct rays no longer reaching the surface of the planet. And most people have noticed that we don't have very much blue sky anymore. So certainly that would fit in with the stated goal of geoengineering patents. We know this metal is falling on the ground, the same exact metals named in numerous geoengineering patents. And quite simply, there's no other rational place they can be coming from. In the Pacific Northwest, we've got 6 or 7 dozen tests in my region alone that show massive quantities of these metals showing up. We know from air studies they're not coming from China, there's simply no other source. There's no industry here, and again, it matches the patents. And there's so much data to corroborate the existence of these programs right now. It's hard to know exactly where to start with people, but if people investigate, they'll come to the conclusion that these programs are definitely deployed.
Yeah, and I was doing some glossing over on the topic earlier, and a couple of those patents that I want to point people to is the stratospheric Welsh box seeding for reduction of global warming. That's actually on, I'm looking at Google patents, but that's even on an alphabetsoup.gov. That's straight from their mouth. And then you got a convention on the prohibition of military and any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques, which is basically a treaty that was done in the 70s. In the 70s, let me remind you, in the 70s, that these types of techniques and technologies are not to be used as weapons between countries. So it definitely points to them being there. Do you have any other kind of like documents that you can think of off the top of your head to point people to this? Because people really do get up in arms about this whole topic.
They do, and to put a little more clarification on what you just mentioned. Yes, that treaty forbids the use of weather manipulation during wartime between adversarial countries, but it does not restrict the use a country's use of such programs on their own populations. And not that anybody gives a damn about international law anyway, because there's really no country on the face of the planet that does, especially the United States. So those treaties really didn't add up to much. But yes, if people want to verify, for example, in the case of the U.S., a document that's quite damning, I found it on the NASA archives about 2.5 years ago. If they just Google 1966 U.S. government document geoengineering, they'll find it because it's posted in a number of sites. It's certainly posted on ours. That's an 80-page presidential document outlining the scope and scale of the U.S. water modification programs at that time, with budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It names various agencies, DOD, DOE, Department of Interior, about a dozen major universities. Again, the history is there. The documentation is there. We have global governance documents now. I mean, there's so much data to corroborate these programs that animosity comes to people who simply do not want their bubble of denial shattered, and they get angry when someone tries to shatter it with this kind of truth that frankly scares the hell out of a lot of people.
So, all right, and that goes a lot into the stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. You had mentioned SRM, solar radiation management. What is that about, and does that account for any of the insane weather that we're seeing? We're completely iced over here on the East Coast. You got snow in places you haven't seen in a long time. I know you guys out west are having a crippling drought. So what is solar radiation management, and does that play a role in any of this odd weather?
It's all connected, and again, with geoengineering, too many people try to put it in this box or that. You have people that connect this with Agenda 21 and eugenics, and indeed, it seems to be a part of that scenario as well. But it has many, many layers. There's many aspects to these programs. So in the case of solar radiation management, again, it's about adjusting the planet's energy balance. But you can't hamper these systems without derailing the entire climate system, and that's what's happening. So yes, you're cold on the East Coast, but we're not just dry on the West Coast. We're in record high temperatures. So Southern California yesterday there was locations in the 90s. Media does not cover this. They don't cover other places around the globe that are shattering record highs day in, day out. So right now, many people are still caught in the Al Gore paradigm, where media is trying to let us know it was warming so that they could implement certain draconian agenda items. But now they have clearly changed directions, and now their goal is to paint a picture of a frozen planet Earth in order to help the geoengineers to sell geoengineering. So those cold temperatures you see will not last that long. And you guys are in for a warm-up in the next 6 to 10 days. That'll change back to cool down later as the West is going back into superheating. So again, people need to look at a broader horizon than just out their window to decide what's happening with the planet. Because right now, the geoengineers are artificially nucleating. You've heard some about that, haven't you, Michael?
Yeah, a little bit, and I've heard it in reference to the snow, which I think it's really unfortunate the conversation that is come out about that with the quote unquote plastic snow and stuff like that. But yes, I've heard a little bit about it, that the nucleation of the atmosphere is creating this geoengineering created snow.
It is. Now, and again, in this case also, we have numerous patents. In fact, there's patents on artificial ice nucleation for weather modification going all the way back to 1950. So when news media comes out and acts like this is some preposterous proposal that this snow could be artificially nucleated, it's simply a lie that it's not nucleated. And again, we have patents going back to 1950, but numerous patents have happened since those distant patents. And it appears that scientifically, there's metal, artificial nucleators like positively charged barium particles. You have chemically nucleated possibilities, like in the case of ammonium and barium hydroxide. And you also have now potentially engineered biological artificial nucleation. And so all of it may be a part of what we see happening, but it is absolutely certain that the snows we've tested are packed full of the same nucleating material that we know is in some of these patents. We're seeing snowfall at 45 degrees, even 50 degrees. The snow is sublimating. And again, there's always different cases. It doesn't mean that all conditions are the same everywhere all the time. Obviously, there's many, many different variances of this. There's still natural snow under the correct conditions. But what we see is this material sublimating, which is what you'd expect from a chemically nucleated frozen material like dry ice. The sublimation means it transitions from a solid state to a gaseous state without going through the liquid state. And that's what we'd expect from artificially nucleated material, and that's what we're seeing.
So there is some validity into the idea of the snow being geoengineered, because, like I said, I think it's the conversation has almost been hijacked into this ridiculous thing with people trying to take lighters to snow and what's the smell and what's that. But it can actually be tested. What you're saying is then in the lab to see if it's geoengineering created snow or naturally produced snow, or is at this point, because of the effects of geoengineering, all snow is going to have these different chemical makeups?
No, you do not have anything uniform across the board. Absolutely not. You have a tremendous amount of variance. So this is why one person in one location might try to melt their snow and maybe it behaves normally, so that they then immediately think that, well, everybody who says it doesn't behave normally must be wrong. People need to understand the conditions are not uniform. How could they be? I mean, when you have the climate being engineered, it would completely depend on your location and how much activity was occurring above you. But certainly we have very, very glaring examples of these engineered snowstorms. A case in point that I use often, Amarillo, Texas, May 1st, 2013. It was 100 degrees in the ground. That's an all-time record high for the day. It snowed the following day on May 2nd. 70-degree temperature swings. You can't get that sort of swing naturally. Historically, it has never happened. We have the 100,000 cattle that died in South Dakota, October 4th, 2013. Now, how could 100,000 cattle die at temperatures of high 30s, low 40s? Why is it snowing at those temperatures? And at the same time, it was in places like Chicago and Kansas City, it was 85 degrees and raining. How could it possibly be cold enough to kill 100,000 cattle in South Dakota October 4th with those kind of temperatures? Because if you have an endothermic reaction, Michael, that's the reaction that occurs when you chemically nucleate. That if you're hitting the surface of that type of reaction, you could have temperatures far into the negative numbers. So if these cattle were encased in an endothermic reacting material and not able to move around, that material against their hides could have killed them, and it appears it did kill them. So people need to start opening their eyes and looking around. And there are other very, very huge red flags, like the decimated ozone layer. It's absolutely shredded. And right now, even before this conference call or this radio show, I was examining more trees in the Redding area where I live in Northern California, and the trees in parking lots the bark is literally scorched off the southwest sides of the trees. It's burnt clear to the core wood. And again, you can't get this without massive amounts of UV radiation. And we're getting UVB readings now that are 1,200% higher than we're being told. So, and we know that's related to geoengineering because the science data makes that clear. People can Google that. Google geoengineering destroys ozone layer. The data is there, Michael. People just need to look for it.
So, would you say that there is legitimate climate change that is happening naturally, and they are doing this in response to that, or is this kind of an example of more Hegelian dialects where they've already engaged in geoengineering, that has changed the weather, they then say, oh my God, the weather is changing, and then engage in more geoengineering to try and cover those tracks?
Yes, I mean your latter scenario is accurate. But the planet is not just warming; it's a total meltdown, and I stand by that. I will stand by that because that's what the data says. In spite of a lot of quote unquote independent news agencies towing the line for the power structure, if you will, by putting out articles. I mean, from some even independent agencies that claim to be in the fight against geoengineering, they're actually putting out data that recognizes these snowstorms as somehow being natural and part of a planetary cooling, which is an absolute lie. And they don't mention in these articles that these cool downs are completely engineered. So here's what we have. Anthropogenic activity, which includes geoengineering. Anthropogenic activity is human activity of which geoengineering is a part. Anthropogenic activity absolutely, positively is warming the planet. And that includes a lot of other things too, not just geoengineering. But geoengineering has completely hijacked the planet's ability to respond to this activity. So for 60-plus years, they've been derailing the planet's natural response systems, its ability to react to what's happening to it. So now the more damage they do, this fits in with what you described in your last statement, the more damage they do, the more they ramp these programs up in an attempt to hide the severity of that damage. It's a very vicious circle, and we are really, really in free fall at this point. So we have a lot of things hurting the climate, but the single greatest destructive factor to the planet at this time, based on all available data, is the climate engineering.
And if it's government patents and things like that, to me that makes perfect sense because that just follows the ideology we see across the board in the economy. You got to fix debt with more debt. In foreign policy, you got to fix wars with more wars. So to me that makes perfect sense and just kind of follows the MO of government. But then that raises the question of is it government that's carrying it out or is it private contractors? Because I know that. You guys have done a piece on a company called Evergreen Air, and that I don't know if that's a government agency or if that's a contractor being used by the government, but if you could kind of expand on that.
It appears the answer is all the above. I mean, certainly you have DOD coordination to these programs. They could not operate otherwise, but it appears there are numerous private entities involved, Evergreen being one. Evergreen, like Blackwater, you know the Blackwater situation with the private mercenaries that are operating in Iraq and other places. So it appears that there are definitely military aircraft involved. Certainly there would be military coordination at the top of this, but there also appear to be there's definitely civilian aircraft involved because we can identify them from the ground with GPS tracking. So FedEx, KLM, a lot of these aircrafts have been identified from the ground, leaving particulate trails. So, and also you have Project Cloverleaf, if people can look that up, appears to outline the use of commercial carriers, non-profitable commercial carriers, to add to the aircraft in the air operating for these programs. And that would make perfect sense, wouldn't it? As you described earlier, the way the government approaches the economy or anything else, they just increase the level of insanity to try to mitigate for what the insanity has already done. So this keeps aircraft in the air, stimulates the economy artificially by pumping money into whoever's operating these aircraft, and it's a covert method of getting even more of these particulates sprayed. So bottom line, it's a very vicious circle, and what people need to understand, we're in a very, very short time horizon. If the weather is spiraling out of control, geoengineering is fueling that fire. Again, no ozone layer, no life on Earth. If the methane continues to release from the Arctic, and right now geoengineering has changed the upper level air currents, as I described earlier, that changes ocean currents. Now we have warm water pumping straight into the Arctic. We have a shredded ozone layer. That allows more thermal energy to penetrate. So even though they're trying to chemically ice nucleate, and they're doing this even in the Arctic, it's like trying to put a fire out with gas. And obviously that doesn't work, so now the methane's releasing from the Arctic. and methane is saturating the atmosphere, which covers it like a layer of glass. Heat gets in, doesn't get out. The methane situation alone could end all life on Earth. It will end all life on Earth if it continues to unfold the direction it's going. So from many different aspects, geoengineering is helping to pound the nails into our collective coffins. And it is that serious. I'm not an alarmist, and anybody who doubts that, I challenge them. Investigate. Look at the PowerPoint presentation I just did. We just posted 2 weeks ago. It's at 100 and some plus thousand views in that time. It's called Climate Engineering, Weather Warfare, and the Collapse of Civilization. And you'll find data on there that I challenge anybody to refute.
So one of the questions I would have for you is, being as involved in this as you are, have you come across any sort of paper trail leading back to like either major corporations or government entities? Like often in these kind of instances where there's illegal operations going on in reason to undermine the public and whatnot, there's always some sort of money trail to find. Have there been any sort of leads that maybe you come across, or for lack of a better term, your colleagues in Geoengineering Watch?
I think it's hard to follow a paper trail when we have those who print the money flooding the system with money. When we have disclosures like we just had on RTTV about 4 weeks ago, that since 1996 the Pentagon cannot account for $8.5 trillion. I think it's clear that those that print the money, those that run the central banks, can pump whatever resources, whatever fiat money they want into whatever program they need it for. So I don't know that that's going to lead us anywhere. We see other signs of geoengineering and the stimulation it's causing for certain businesses. For example, after the Cancun Global Climate Conference and after the Copenhagen Global Climate Conference, both of those conferences, at the time of the conference, in that location of the conference, experienced record low temperatures. In spite of warmer than normal temperatures in the surrounding regions. Was that a demonstration of geoengineering? It's certainly incredible to think that could happen 2 years in a row. And we saw, after those conferences, we saw aluminum futures go through the roof, 25-30% increases. Companies like LaSalle, companies like Alcoa, for example. So was that just the reflection of nations that were forced to sign on to geoengineering at those conferences, and now the economic stimulation happened after that by the escalation of aluminum futures? We do see things like that occurring, but as far as money that comes from the black hole that it comes from, pretty hard to trace that, I think.
You know, and to back that up, we have posted on Facebook.com/thebigplantation an article from CollectiveEvolution.com. See for yourself, the Pentagon has spent $52.6 billion taxpayer dollars on black budget programs, meaning we don't know what they are, we can't account for them. And then the article starts off with a quote: according to our best estimates, more than half of all U.S. government records are classified. For an archivist seeking to preserve and understand our history, that means most of our history is kept secret from us. Think about that for a moment. So, I mean, while that might not be direct proof, it does certainly spark some speculation as to where that money is going. We see the patents, as you said. We see the fruits of those patents on the ground, in the water, in the snow, and we see them spraying. We see all kinds of things. So it looks more and more. But we're coming up on the break, and we're going to have you here on the next segment. But we're going to be opening up the phone lines on the other side, and for anyone to call in. I know I invited some skeptics to call in. I just ask that anybody who is a skeptic that calls in just please respect the format, because I know this can get to be a heated topic. But our number is 567-314-9296. That's 567-314-9296 is the call-in number. And so if one of you guys could put that in the chat, that would be great. But yeah, we will be right back here on the other line to take your calls with Dane Wigington of geoengineeringwatch.org.
Always under siege. Wake up, don't always follow like a sheep. Propaganda orchestration, life is but a dream.
Do you have a group or organization founded on the principles of personal liberty, health freedom, or accountable government? We invite you to check out Same Side Entertainment. Same Side is a source for activists and liberty organizations to connect with well-known leaders in today's growing movement for sustainable living, personal liberty, and sovereignty issues. Same Side has a variety of keynote speakers, debate panels, interactive web presentations, musicians, and liberty-based entertainment, as well as services for web design, graphic design, video, and photography. Same Side can help customize your event by connecting you to the best of the liberty and political world while staying within your budget. Get connected with leaders in the liberty movement like Tom Woods, Kevin Gutzman, Jack Hunter, Robert Scott Bell, Bob Murphy, Michael Scheuer, John Bush, Jordan Page, Tatiana Moroz, and many more. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and our website at www.samesideentertainment.com. Again, that's www.samesideentertainment.com. Same Side Entertainment, connecting you with the education and resources you need.
Obamacare. Fun. Cool. YOLO. At Obamacare, we believe in saying the words affordable health care so that young people will love us and sign up like lemmings. Sure, you pay 2.5% of your income in penalties, but young people don't have to worry about that because you don't have a job. Work sucks. That's why we at Obamacare want to trade your full-time job for a part-time one. So you'll have more time for fun things, like watching millionaire celebrities tweet about how affordable we are. Obamacare. Just like guys enjoy premium leather seats, so too you'll enjoy paying triple the healthcare premiums out of your new part-time salary. Speaking of guys, ever been on a mandate before? At Obamacare, we're full of mandates. But don't worry, big corporations get exempt, so you don't have to. It's fun paying for things you don't even use. Yeah, you work out, stay healthy. But come on, brah. Someone's got to pay for people who smoke, drink 85-ounce sodas, and live in a Barcalounger. So enjoy your premium hikes, young people of America, because everyone loves hikes. Obamacare. If millionaire celebrities can afford us, why can't you? A message from the White House Office of Obamacare. Propaganda to get young people to love us and sign up like lemmings.
In every age, a technology is created that upends the foundations of society. The wheel, the printing press, the internet. Now, in a world sliding into financial chaos, a new technology is changing the way monetary systems work around the world. It is called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a new form of money, controlled not by banks, governments, or corporations, but through mutual commerce between free individuals. To learn more, visit weusecoins.com.
Well, yeah, it's getting tough out there. Yeah, no doubt. I work in home invasions, mostly. Some murder, occasional rape, if she's hot, or really bitchy. And I'm a huge advocate of gun control, absolutely. Every time I kick in a door or smash a window, I face the possibility of being shot and killed. Allowing citizens to own guns creates a hostile work environment for me and my associates. No one should have to work under those conditions. I say make them all illegal, absolutely. I mean, I break the law for a living. I'm a professional, so it doesn't really bother me. No doubt. No doubt.
Your local violent criminals work hard and put their lives on the line every time they attempt to murder, rape, abduct, or assault a member of the citizenry. They desperately need your help. With your support, there may finally come a day when a violent criminal can have his way with you or someone you love without the fear, anxiety, and stress caused by knowing there's a possibility his victim might be armed. Please show your support by voting for stronger anti-gun legislation because criminals prefer unarmed citizens.
In 1997, a high school shooting was stopped by a vice principal with a gun. In 1998, a middle school shooting was ended by a neighbor with a gun. In 2002, a terrorist attack was stopped by a school guard and a teacher with a gun. After September 11th, pilots began carrying guns to protect their passengers. Let's give our schools and teachers the same option. Sign the petition at defendschools.com.
Thanks for listening to FPRN. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like to start your own show with FPRN, Advertise with us or donate to the network or to your favorite shows. Check out our website at www.fprnradio.com.
I promise you that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the
Say
bank.
it with me, industrial, military complex. If that's new to you, let us explain the scary concept. It's a global takeover, submit you with rockets.
And we are back on the second segment of our guest section here of the show, and everybody's favorite Fuhrer was opening us up right there. And, you know, he just announced a $1 billion commitment towards climate change, and he's had a history of having interest in climate change, and it looks to it doesn't outright say carbon taxes, but that's looking like where it's headed under his direction. And Dane, before we go to the phones, I want to give you a chance, because who knows where these conversations are going to go. I want to give you a chance to plug your website, plug any work you're doing, and is there any further film projects coming up?
Well, first, one tool people can use, George Barnes did a film called Look Up. It's at a website called SkyderAlert.com, SKYDER alert.com. That's a great tool to use. Geoengineeringwatch.org, certainly we try to post all the recent data we can on our site. And again, for those that don't think this is going on, those are people who either have not investigated or who have made up their mind without the facts. It's that simple. This is not a job I wanted, but quite simply, if one understands the gravity of this issue and the ramifications to every single living thing on the planet, you come to the conclusion, if you truly examine the data, that if we don't deal with this issue, if we don't stop these programs, nothing else is going to matter. So I challenge anybody to truly objectively investigate the information and not be compelled to join us in this fight.
All right, so I know we got a couple callers on the line. Let's start with Julio. Are you there, Julio?
Good evening, guys. I am here. Good evening, and Mr. Wigington, always a pleasure to hear you on the airwaves. And as someone who studied broadcasting in college and was inspiring to be a sports broadcaster, your work and others who have investigated geoengineering really inspired me to look into this issue and to focus a documentary on this issue and spend thousands of dollars of money I didn't have to look into this issue. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Mr. Wigington, for looking into this issue and inspiring myself and many others. I really do appreciate your work.
Thank you, Julio. I would certainly like to see whatever your finished product is. We need every tool out there we can get, so please contact me when you have a finished product.
Well, absolutely. I'd like to contact you to interview you. And I spent some time last year in Northern California, from past San Francisco near Ukiah all the way towards Lake Tahoe, state line Nevada, just on the border of California and Nevada. And I was able to see firsthand, at least from my research, the impacts of geoengineering in California. I'm a Midwest boy. I'm from Chicago. So seeing all the beautiful trees in California really being destroyed by some of the geoengineering programs really was devastating. Seeing all of the solar radiation management programs going on was really devastating to see. And I was able to speak to a member of the Council on Foreign Relations in one of their conference calls. He works in their climate change department, and I asked him point blank, what, the CFI, as people know, is the big, think tank globalist organization. I asked him, what would the president do with geoengineering? Would he endorse this, or would he allow his surrogates to endorse a geoengineering program? And this man told me that, in fact, the president is looking into geoengineering. However, it's too controversial to endorse it publicly. He is considering it along with NGOs like the National Academy on Sciences. They just got done doing a whole series of conferences on geoengineering. And in fact, there's a conference this week for any listeners in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay area at the University of California, Berkeley. There's a geoengineering program taking place with the keynote speaker being one Ken Caldera, who teaches now at Stanford University. He's a big advocate for geoengineering. But my question to you, Mr. Wigington, is we're seeing more and more political figures, NGO figures, political actors linking severe weather to climate change. And they're saying, these mega storms are going to continue to happen because of climate change. To me, I see, through my research, I'm seeing more geoengineering causing these freak storms. What do you see the new trends being in terms of geoengineering? Are we going to see government continue to exploit these geoengineering programs to say, in fact, that it is climate change? And what are your thoughts on the openness of the discussion of geoengineering, going from CBS News interviewing Michio Kaku to even Comedy Central, Stephen Colbert's show, having Professor David Keith on to talk about geoengineering, even to the Weather Channel, who just recently interviewed someone from the Desert Research Institute, DRI, out of Reno, Nevada, talking about cloud seeding and those programs. So what are your thoughts on the openness of geoengineering and government exploiting these severe storms with geoengineering?
First, on the separation of the climate, its behavior, and geoengineering, at this point there's no separating or no way to separate what's happening with the climate, what would be happening without geoengineering. Everything is convoluted at this point. Yes, the events we see are absolutely engineered. The train of engineered snowstorms on the East Coast look like Cyclone Haiyan was intensified at the last minute. We have leaders of nations like Iran, president and vice president, on the floor of the UN saying publicly, although our media doesn't cover it, that their countries are being droughted out by Western NATO climate engineering programs. We see examples of weather warfare with Pakistan, appear to be weather warfare with Thailand. Anybody who doesn't toe the line for the power structure has a weather catastrophe. But that being said, the climate system now, in large part because of these programs, is coming apart. It's literally coming apart, and geoengineering is fueling the fire day in, day out. So it's hard to separate what would occur naturally, but we have double collapse scenario. If and when we get geoengineering stopped, there will be severe weather now. You can bet on it, because the climate system has been horrifically damaged from a lot of sources. Again, geoengineering being a primary one. As far as Caldera, David Keith, and others, they are nothing more than red herrings. Their purpose is to paint the impression, the same with the scientific publications, the mainstream ones, that geoengineering is only a proposal. That's an absolute lie. When Obama and his science advisors, John Holden, say they're considering it, absolute lie. These programs have been going on, as I just outlined. We know from documentation going back to the 60s and 50s, these programs have existed all along. So that's a complete lie. And yes, you see some talking about endorsing these programs, but you also see people like Al Gore, who just went on the record about a month ago saying geoengineering would be, quote, insane, utterly mad. Now, why is Gore saying that? Because perhaps he knows they can't hide this much longer, and he wants to distance himself from these programs because he knows they won't be able to keep this behind the curtain much longer. So I think we're seeing a fraying in the power structure. I think we're seeing a panic in the power structure. They know that the walls are closing in, that these programs can't be hidden much longer. And once they're fully exposed, you're going to have a population around the globe just foaming at the mouth mad, knowing that they've been a part of a grand and lethal experiment, and that Junior's autism and Granny's Alzheimer's all are likely connected to these programs. I think you're going to have a population that's grabbing their pitchforks and torches, and we're close to that.
I agree. And one final question, if I may, and that is, I spoke to the director of National Weather Service at a public conference, and he lied to me twice to a large audience about how he is unaware of any weather modification programs or geoengineering programs, and that, in fact, his own satellites can't detect whether or not these programs are taking place. In the meantime, I attended a weather modification conference where a person from North Dakota told me that, in fact, they use National Weather Service technologies, radars, and have their flights insured, not insured, but approved by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Where do you see these weather media networks like the Weather Channel or AccuWeather? How do you see them linked up, and even National Weather Service linked up with these private groups in the military to cover up geoengineering?
Well, that's a great question. Let's start with, who does the modeling for the National Weather Service? How about Raytheon? They do the modeling, all the graphic modeling for the National Weather Service. Raytheon does all the modeling for NOAA. So you have the Foxes literally running the in-house. Who owns Weather Channel, Weather Central, Weather Underground, Rothschilds? What a coincidence. So literally, they have taken control, complete control of all the weather disseminating agencies because they have to control the message. And as far as these people not knowing, that's completely impossible to believe. So at this point, they're either in some alternate reality, they're clinically blind, or they're paid liars. And I certainly would, or they're being threatened. Now, some people are being threatened. I think in the case of David Suzuki and some others, perhaps they're just being threatened to toe the line. But from any of those reasons I listed, there is no chance these people don't know. And I've spoken to NOAA scientists off the record. They told me, and I quote verbatim, "We know about these programs. We're alarmed as hell. We don't know what to do about it. We have no First Amendment protection." That's an exact quote from a NOAA scientist to my face. So they know. And if we could simply give enough cover for these people where they felt safe coming out of the cracks and the shadows, the dam would break from 100 different directions because they know. In Weather Channel, anybody who watches Weather Channel, you can see that these guys know they're lying their backsides off when they're trying to explain why it's snowing at 45 degrees, why there's all these ice storms now in between the transition zone between the warm side of the winter storm and the cold side. Since when do winter storms have a warm side and a cold side? One side with tornadoes and thunder showers, and the other side with snow with an ice storm in the middle every time. And they're pumping. Since when do you have winter storms with moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico again and again and again? It's absolutely ridiculous. These people know, and they should be held accountable too. All those who toe the line, like the National Weather Service person you told me about, they should be kept track of and literally at some point put on trial as accessories to this crime.
That was Dr. Cuccinelli, who said that the current director of National Weather Service, who told me he was unaware of any current weather modification program. So, Mr. Wigington, thanks for your work, and I'll let the guys get to other callers. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julio.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the call, Julio. And anybody who's interested, Julio's documentary can be found on YouTube if you type in Genetically Modified Society. I personally saw some of the work that he was doing, and he really got out there and hustled to make that documentary happen. So good job, Julio, and check out that documentary. But we're going to bring our next caller, who I'm pretty sure is a skeptic. We got Keith on the line. Keith, how's it going?
Keith, almost guy. Go ahead, Keith.
One second. Producer's having trouble unmuting him. I really want him to unmute him, though. Because I think I know. It's actually Keith Smith, our former co-host, who started this whole project with me. So while we're waiting
hey,
for him,
how's it going? Thanks for having me
go.
on.
Keith. Can you hear me, Keith?
How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Yep, no problem. Anytime.
Can you hear me?
So
All right, I've got a couple questions. I am a skeptic. I'm a skeptic because I have not seen any reasonable proof, and the proof that has been out there has been proven false positives, and they were poorly conducted tests.
Can you give me an example of that, Keith?
What in the world are we spraying?
Well, that film is not proof. I want you to cite a particular example that you say was cited as proof. It's not proof. The film is.
Well, they didn't take air samples or water samples. They took soil samples, and soil.
Contrary. I've taken a lot of those samples myself, and they're in that film. I've taken about 50 samples myself at the state lab. Precipitation only. I have never ever sampled soil ever because you cannot isolate the element of the soil, so only precipitation samples have I taken, and snow, and I have never taken one that did not contain these toxic metals, some with amounts that are literally thousands of times above anything that should be expected, even in an urban area.
Okay, and I guess, and you're referring to, they have patents on these, like Agent Orange is an example of, I'd say that's a form of geoengineering where they just wiped out whole forests, by using herbicide. But you're talking about, changing the climate of the earth, and this would be such a massive project. You're talking tens of billions of dollars a month, because there's over 30,000 flights in America a day. And
I don't dispute those numbers. I would agree with you on those numbers and the massive size of this, and I would again cite that although Mike mentioned, I believe, that there was $50 billion unaccounted for in black ops, I would also again cite that we know now on the record that there's another $8.5 trillion, over 160 times more than that $50 billion that's unaccounted for. So there's a seemingly endless amount of funds that is not accounted for with the Pentagon.
Yeah, but you see, like they can't. That's the thing. They can't keep. There's always a whistleblower, and there's always. I mean, they couldn't keep Fast and Furious under wraps. They couldn't keep the atom bomb. I mean, it didn't take long until the Russians had the atom bomb. They try to keep things under wraps, but they can't. You would think that if they were doing this in the 1950s, like a lot of people have been claiming, even though you see these chemtrails and photos dating back into the 1940s. That somebody, I mean, they couldn't keep Monica Lewinsky under wraps. I mean, how are they going to, a massive, you're talking like a huge program where there would be millions of people involved. And
I don't know about millions.
Somebody's got to open their mouth.
Well, one person has. Chrissy Magan has shown a tremendous amount of courage, former Air Force industrial hygienist. I encourage people to look at what she has to say. She's shown a tremendous amount of courage. And as far as anybody else speaking out, John Wheeler, former Bush administration aide, when all the birds fell out of the sky, as many might remember a couple of years ago, what people don't know is the birds fell out of the sky in 34 places around the globe at the same time. Now, certainly this should have been headlines on every paper, but John Wheeler was seen outside the Pentagon threatening to blow the whistle on these programs. He was found in a landfill 2 days later. So I think that people now know that they are monitored, top to bottom. If they open their mouth, they know how they'll end up like John Wheeler. I think we know that. I mentioned the NOAA officials that I spoke to, and in addition, as far as amazing as that is, that there's not coverage of this, the media simply calls white black and black white with these programs. Even though we have film footage of these tankers spraying at altitude, I challenge anybody, Google KC-10 tankers spraying at altitude. We have film footage of the crimes being committed. We have a ground contamination issue that's absolutely astounding. We have soil pHs changing, and that's what you're referring to in the first film. That's not soil testing. That's for particular elements. It's soil pH changes, and those are absolutely solid readings. We have USDA baselines for the forests in Northern California down to the acre. I have these studies in my possession. And we now know that so much metal has fallen on us that soil pHs have changed 10 to 12 times to alkaline, should be headlined in every paper. Nobody will touch it. Nobody will touch this issue in mainstream media because we know who's pulling their strings. So the bottom line is, though, the die-off is so horrific. Species extinction rate right now is 200 species a day, 10,000 times natural variability. Forests are imploding. 30% of Alaska's boreal forests are dead. There's no hiding this much longer. Wait and see.
Now, Keith, I know in private conversations...
It's just one quick question. All right? Now, explain this because I don't know if this would prove chemtrails to be real or if it would prove them to be false. But I have noticed that when a low-pressure system is moving into a high-pressure system, that the airplanes coming out of the low-pressure system have contrails or chemtrails. But as soon as they hit the high-pressure system, there is no trails behind them. And whenever there's a high-pressure system, there is no chemtrails in the sky. How would that be explained? Do they only spray during low-pressure systems?
No, it's not true. I mean, for one, we have less humidity in a high-pressure system, obviously. But we see them spraying in high pressure over Northern California all the time. All the time. We see tankers at low altitudes. And again, in the case of a KC-135, for example, they have a lower flight altitude for maximum payload carrying. It's 22,000 feet, something in that range. We see them at that level, leaving massive particulate trails behind them, and even with plumes that are veering off to the side of the aircraft. Now, either the jet engine's mounted crooked, or there's a nozzle that's not aligned correctly, because clearly the jet engine isn't mounted crooked. And we have film footage of them spraying during high pressure, massive plumes. We have film of them turning on and off during high pressure over California. So that one doesn't hold up. I mean, you're going to see more of any kind of particulate trail in the sky during low pressure, and they tend to hit the front of the storms because that's where the atmospheric river is, and that's where they try to aerosolize and hijack the most moisture. But we absolutely have film footage of them spraying during high pressure.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much for taking my questions.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you. Have a good day.
Awesome. So, I mean, we got 5 minutes left. Dane, I'll just give you the floor if you have anything you want to wrap up on.
Thank you. You know, I would leave with this, that geoengineering is not just another issue. The climate engineering is an issue that will decide all of our fates. Again, this is the last battle I ever wanted. But quite simply, the gravity of it is so immense, the ramifications so total, that I felt that I believe the data dictates that if we do not expose and stop these programs, that quite literally it will soon be game over. And as statistical proof of that, I want to cite it again. The species extinction rate today, anybody can look this up if they do any investigation. It's 10,000 times natural variability. That's 10,000 times normal. We're in the 6th great mass extinction right now. And there, statistically, mathematically, there is no greater source to planetary environmental decimation than geoengineering. Not the only source. Again, we've done an endless list of damage to the planet. But the climate engineering, every breath we take, every single breath, we're sucking this stuff in, building up in our systems. If we can't think clearly, we'll not meet any challenge, not Fukushima, not anything else. So I challenge and implore people, learn about this issue, help us bring it to light while we still have something left to salvage of our planet and its life support systems and our health.
And Dane, I'm going to try and squeeze in one more call real quick, if you can bring them on. I believe we have Kristen on the line. Do we have them?
I'm not Kristen.
Oh, okay. Well, I knew there was more than one caller. I'm sorry. Caller, what's your name and what do you got? We got about 3 minutes.
Well, I'm calling. Well, I was hoping you could talk to Kristen because she would be the better one. I'm just calling from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I just wanted to say something.
Go ahead. We got 3 minutes.
Okay, well, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and we are actually used to be the sunniest place to live in Canada, for, beautiful blue skies and that. And in the last 2 years, that's just so changed. This winter, we have not had one day where the sky has been nice and clear and blue. It's been totally full of these aerosol clouds. And I've just spent the last 2 weeks in California, and Palm Springs, California, San Diego, Los Angeles, and they were just plain spraying everywhere. There was heavy overcast, and there was virtually no blue sky. And I think when you say, well, where's the proof? You don't have to be a scientist or anything. You just have to look up in the sky and know something is wrong because the blue sky has disappeared, and people really need to wake up about this.
Thank you for your comment, ma'am. And I want to expound on one of your last statements. You don't have to be a scientist. In fact, people have been conditioned to accept what a quote-unquote expert says isn't happening or is happening, and they don't think cognitively themselves. I encourage everybody to think for yourself, investigate for yourself, and understand the gravity of this situation because our situation is very, very immediate. It is not some long, protracted equation. The walls are closing in on all of us very quickly, so we need all of us in this battle to help move the ball forward and expose this issue, again, before we have nothing left to salvage.
Well, thank you for your call.
Well, thank you for all your work. Okay, thank you.
And we are coming up against the end of the show. I just want to thank all the listeners. I want to thank Dane Wigington here, and look forward to more work from you. Definitely check out geoengineeringwatch.org. Make sure to check out Facebook.com/ or not FPRN, no, but you should check out Facebook.com/FPRN Radio, but also Facebook.com/ The Big Plantation for all of our news stories. Again, want to thank everybody for listening. Want to thank my girlfriend for texting me to make sure and tell me about how bad I am with directions 3 times in the middle of the show. But we will be back next week, and once again, thank you very much, Dane.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to FPRN. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like to start your own show with FPRN, advertise with us, or donate to the network or to your favorite shows, check out our website at www.fprnradio.com.